She raised the heavy metal-tipped training stick high above her head and brought it down with all her strength directly onto the scarred back of the German Shepherd. The sickening crack echoed across the pristine lawn. Over 40 wealthy spectators watched a high society woman strike a passive, injured animal, and not a single person stepped forward to stop her. The event director? He demanded. The dog's owner apologized. The security guards? They just stared at the grass. But none of these entitled elites realized the massive mistake they had just made. They didn't know that the quiet man in the faded jeans was an active-duty Navy SEAL. And they had absolutely no idea that the dog bleeding on the ground was a decorated combat veteran who was about to save one of their own lives. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from, and if you love stories that melt your heart, please subscribe to support our channel. The morning sun baked the pristine asphalt of the Coastal Elite Canine Academy in San Diego. Brooks parked his beat-up Ford truck between a shiny Range Rover and a custom Mercedes van. He cut the engine and sat in the quiet cab for a moment, observing the area. Brooks was a man built out of sharp angles and quiet intensity. In his early 30s, he wore his dark hair cut close to the scalp. A plain gray t-shirt stretched across his broad shoulders, and faded jeans covered his legs. He moved with the deliberate economy of an active-duty Navy SEAL on leave. He did not waste energy. He did not make unnecessary noise. He stepped out of the truck and opened the rear door. "Out," he said softly. Titan jumped down onto the pavement. The German Shepherd did not look like the other dogs arriving at the academy. Titan was massive, but his coat lacked the glossy sheen of a show dog. A jagged patch of missing fur marked his left flank, a permanent reminder of shrapnel from a blast in a faraway desert. A thin, white scar ran across his snout. Titan stood perfectly still beside Brooks. His amber eyes scanned the parking lot. He processed every movement, every sound. Brooks grabbed the leather leash. He did not really need it, but the civilian world required rules. They walked toward the main entrance. The academy grounds looked like a private country club. Manicured green lawns stretched out in every direction. White canopy tents provided shade for the attendees. People wore expensive casual clothes, holding leashes attached to perfectly groomed poodles, golden retrievers, and Afghan hounds. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh ocean breeze. People often judge a man by the company he keeps, but in places like this, they judge him entirely by the pedigree at the end of his leash. Brooks noticed the stares immediately. Men in polo shirts and women in designer sunglasses stopped their conversations. They looked at Brooks, then looked at Titan, and their expressions shifted from curiosity to clear distaste. They pulled their pristine dogs closer. They stepped aside, giving Brooks and Titan an unusually wide path. Brooks ignored them. He kept his eyes focused forward, naturally assessing the perimeter, noting the exits and the flow of the crowd. They reached the registration desk under a large white pavilion. A young woman named Chloe stood behind the table. She wore a neat blue polo shirt with the Academy logo. She had bright blonde hair tied in a ponytail and a forced professional smile. Her smile faltered slightly when Brooks and Titan stepped up to the table. Titan sat down automatically, his body pressing lightly against Brooks's leg. "Good morning," Chloe said. Her voice wavered just a bit. "Can I help you?" "Checking in," Brooks said. His voice was deep and calm. "Name is Brooks. I registered online for the agility trial." Chloe looked down at her tablet. She scrolled through the list. She glanced up at Titan, her eyes catching the thick scar on his snout. "Brooks, yes, I see you here. And the dog's name is Titan?" "That is correct." Chloe handed him a plastic badge with a number on it. "Your group will be called in about 30 minutes. You can wait in the prep area over there." She pointed toward a crowded section of the lawn near the main obstacle course. "Thank you," Brooks said. He took the badge and clipped it to his shirt. He led Titan toward the waiting area. As they walked deeper into the crowd, the environment changed. The noise level rose sharply. Dozens of dogs barked. Owners shouted commands in high-pitched, frantic voices. Metal collars clinked against water bowls. Loudspeakers crackled with sudden announcements. The sheer volume of unstructured, unpredictable sound hit Titan hard. Brooks felt the tension travel up the leather leash. Titan's ears pinned back against his skull. The dog's breathing quickened, turning into rapid, shallow pants. Titan began to pace, his claws clicking erratically against the concrete path intersecting the lawn. The chaotic environment mirrored the chaotic sounds of a combat zone. To Titan, the sudden shouts of the dog owners sounded like panicked orders under fire. The sharp crack of microphone feedback sounded like a gunshot. The trauma response hijacked the dog's nervous system. Titan spun in a tight circle, whining low in his throat, his body trembling with raw adrenaline. The nearby attendees noticed the struggling German shepherd. A man in a pastel shirt pulled his perfectly brushed Labrador away, muttering loudly about dangerous animals. A woman nearby gasped and clutched her small terrier to her chest. The whispers started. They pointed at Titan. They looked at Brooks with outright condemnation. They assumed Brooks was an amateur who could not control a vicious, broken dog. The crowd began to form a wide ring around them, waiting for the dog to snap. Brooks saw the judgment in their eyes, but he did not care about the crowd. He only cared about his partner. He knew exactly what Titan was experiencing. Brooks had fought his own battles with the ghosts of war. Brooks stopped walking. He dropped to one knee, bringing himself down to Titan's eye level. He did not reach out to pet the dog. He did not use a soothing, babying voice like the other owners around them. Sympathy in this moment would only validate Titan's panic. Titan needed structure. Titan needed a mission. Brooks raised his right hand. He snapped his fingers. The sound was sharp, distinct, and cut right through the noise of the crowd. Titan's head snapped around. His wild eyes locked onto Brooks's calm, steady gaze. "Focus," Brooks said. He used his command voice. It was not loud, but it carried absolute authority and unwavering certainty. Titan stopped pacing. The trembling slowed. "Hold!" Brooks commanded. In a fraction of a second, the panic vanished from Titan's posture. The military training overrode the fear. Titan sat up completely straight. He pushed his chest out. His ears stood tall and alert. He transformed instantly from a terrified animal into a disciplined soldier awaiting his next order. He did not look at the crowd. He did not flinch at the barking dogs. He only looked at Brooks. The murmurs in the crowd died down instantly. The sudden, total silence from the onlookers was louder than their whispers. They stared in absolute shock. They spent thousands of dollars on elite trainers, yet none of their dogs possessed that level of instantaneous, unbreakable focus. Brooks stood back up. He did not look around to see the impressed or confused faces of the wealthy attendees. He patted Titan on the side of the neck once. "Good boy," Brooks said quietly. They walked toward the edge of the grass to wait for their turn, moving together as a single, perfectly synchronized unit. They did not belong in this glossy world, but they were not going anywhere. A black luxury SUV pulled up to the VIP drop-off zone just outside the main training field. A hired driver rushed out to open the rear door. Evelyn stepped onto the pristine grass. She was a woman in her late 40s with sharp facial features and icy blue eyes. She wore a tailored white suit that looked completely impractical for an outdoor canine event. Her blonde hair fell in perfect, stiff waves that defied the ocean breeze. She held a thin, crystal-studded leash in her right hand. At the end of the leash stood Prince, an Afghan hound with flowing, flawless blonde fur. Prince had won 3 regional championships. Evelyn made sure everyone in the state knew it. Evelyn did not walk. She paraded. She expected the world to part for her, and in this environment, it usually did. She was the primary sponsor of the Coastal Elite Canine Academy. Her family money funded the new obstacle courses, the air-conditioned kennels, and the catered food tents. She demanded a separate water station for Prince the moment she arrived. She forced a teenage volunteer to wipe down the plastic chair she intended to sit on. She operated under the strict assumption that her wealth insulated her from the rules that governed everyone else. "Clear the path," Evelyn snapped at a young staff member carrying a clipboard. "Prince needs a stress-free environment before his run. Move those people back." The staff member scrambled to obey. He quickly ushered attendees to the sides. People smiled at Evelyn. They complimented Prince. They hoped to secure an invitation to her annual charity gala. Evelyn ignored all of them. She kept her chin high, her eyes scanning the waiting area to ensure her reserved spot met her exacting standards. She walked past the preparation zone. Her eyes landed on Brooks and Titan. She stopped abruptly. Prince bumped into her leg, letting out a soft, confused whine. Evelyn stared at Titan. She saw the missing patch of fur. She saw the thick, jagged scar across the dog's snout. She saw a large, heavily muscled animal that looked like it belonged in a junkyard, not an elite training facility. Then she looked at Brooks. She took in his faded jeans, his plain gray shirt, and his short military haircut. She felt a surge of immediate, intense irritation. They ruined the aesthetic of her expensive event. She felt a physical revulsion toward the quiet confidence Brooks displayed. He did not seek approval from the crowd. Evelyn hated people she could not intimidate. Power reveals itself in small ways. Some people use it to protect others, while some use it to crush anything that does not reflect their own polished image. Evelyn belonged firmly to the second category. She believed money bought her the right to dictate reality. Evelyn marched directly toward Brooks. Her high heels sank slightly into the soft grass, but she did not care. She stopped 3 feet away from him, invading his personal space intentionally. "Excuse me," Evelyn said. Her voice was loud and piercing. She wanted the surrounding crowd to hear her. "Are you lost?" Brooks stood up slowly. He kept his posture relaxed. He looked at Evelyn with calm, completely neutral eyes. "No, ma'am." Evelyn crossed her arms over her pristine white suit. "This is an elite agility trial. This is not a public dog park. We do not allow aggressive, street-level animals to participate here. Your dog looks like a stray." Titan sat quietly next to Brooks. The German Shepherd did not react to Evelyn's loud voice. He remained in his focused, disciplined state. He watched a butterfly flutter near the edge of the grass. "He is registered," Brooks said simply. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend Titan's appearance. He stated a basic fact. "I do not care about your paperwork," Evelyn scoffed. She gestured toward Titan with a perfectly manicured hand. "Look at him. He is covered in scars. He is filthy. You clearly lack the funds or the knowledge to maintain a proper animal. You are an amateur, and you are putting our purebreds at risk by bringing that thing here." The crowd around them grew completely silent. People stopped brushing their dogs. They watched the confrontation with wide eyes. They knew exactly who Evelyn was. Nobody dared to intervene. Brooks looked at the skittish Afghan hound, then back at Evelyn. "My dog is clean. He is trained. He will not bother you or your animal unless you provoke him. We will wait for our turn." "Your dog is a liability," Evelyn said, taking another step forward. "He is staring at Prince. He is clearly plotting an attack." Brooks shifted his weight slightly. "My dog is trained to ignore distractions, even loud ones." Evelyn caught the insult. Her eyes narrowed into furious slits. "You think you are clever. You think you can bring a rescue project here and play the hero. This is a sport for professionals. You are embarrassing yourself." "I am here to run a course," Brooks replied, "not to impress you." Evelyn's face turned bright red. She turned around frantically. She spotted the event director, a short, balding man named Richard. He held a walkie-talkie and looked incredibly stressed. "Richard!" Evelyn yelled. She waved her arm sharply in the air. "Get over here, right now!" Richard sprinted over. He arrived out of breath, his face slick with sweat. "Mrs. Evelyn, is there a problem? Is Prince okay?" "Prince is distressed," Evelyn lied effortlessly. She pointed a sharp finger directly at Brooks's chest. This man sneaked an aggressive, mutilated dog into the competitor area. I want him removed immediately. He is ruining the prestige of this event. Richard looked at Brooks. He looked at Titan. He saw the official registration badge clipped to Brooks's shirt. Mrs. Evelyn, he has a badge. He passed the entry requirements this morning. I do not care what your pathetic entry requirements say, Evelyn interrupted. Her voice reached a shrill, commanding pitch. I write the checks for this academy. I paid for that pavilion you are standing under. If you want my funding to continue next season, you will kick this amateur and his mutt off the property right now. Richard swallowed hard. He looked at Brooks with an apologetic, weak expression. He was caught between standard academy rules and a massive bank account. He knew which one paid his salary. Sir, Richard started, his voice shaking visibly. Maybe it would be best if you packed up and— He stays, a voice called out. It was Chloe, the young woman from the registration desk. She walked over, looking terrified but determined. His paperwork is flawless. His dog passed the temperament screening with a perfect score. You cannot kick him out just because of how the dog looks. Evelyn glared at Chloe with absolute venom. You are fired. You do not own the staffing company, Chloe shot back, though her hands trembled at her sides. Brooks watched the exchange silently. He felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. He had seen this exact kind of entitlement before. He had seen warlords demand tribute from starving villagers. He had seen corrupt officials ignore the pleas of the innocent. The scale was different, but the arrogance was exactly the same. I will wait for my turn, Brooks told Richard. He spoke softly, but the heavy tone ended the discussion. It left absolutely no room for debate. Evelyn sneered. She grabbed Prince's leash tightly. Fine, let the mutt run. He will fail miserably anyway. And when he does, I will personally ensure you are permanently banned from every facility in this state. She yanked the leash. The Afghan hound stumbled slightly as Evelyn dragged him away toward the VIP seating area. She left a trail of tense, heavy silence behind her. The spectators quickly looked away, pretending they had not seen anything. Brooks looked down at Titan. The German shepherd looked back up at him, completely unbothered by the screaming woman. Just another mission, buddy, Brooks whispered. The loudspeaker crackled to life. A voice called Brooks and Titan to the starting line. Brooks unclipped his badge and handed it to a track official. The official looked at Titan with a skeptical eye, but said nothing. Brooks led Titan to the gate. The agility course sat in the center of the main lawn. It featured a series of complex obstacles. There were tall A-frames, weaving poles, elevated walkways, and dark tunnels. The wealthy owners trained their dogs for months to memorize these specific setups. They used treats, clickers, and high-pitched praise. Brooks used none of these. He unclipped Titan's leash. He stepped back. Ready? Brooks said softly. Titan dropped into a low crouch. His muscles coiled tight beneath his scarred coat. His amber eyes locked onto the first obstacle. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the other dogs. He waited for the command. Go, Brooks said. Titan exploded forward. He did not run like a show dog. He moved like a guided missile. He cleared the first hurdle with effortless power. He hit the A-frame, scrambling up the steep incline and down the other side in 3 massive strides. He navigated the weaving poles with a fluid, terrifying grace. His body bent and snapped through the narrow gaps at a speed that made the audience gasp. Brooks did not run alongside him like the other handlers. He stood near the center of the field. He used sharp, short hand signals. He gave quiet, one-word commands. Titan obeyed instantly. The dog entered the dark tunnel and shot out the other side a second later. He leaped over the final broad jump, clearing it by almost 2 feet. He landed softly, spun around, and ran straight back to Brooks. He sat perfectly still at Brooks's left side, awaiting further orders. The digital timer flashed on the large screen. The time was incredible. It shattered the previous record set by Prince, Evelyn's Afghan hound. Total silence fell over the lawn. The wealthy spectators forgot their disdain for a moment. They recognized raw, undeniable competence. A few people started to clap. Soon, the applause spread. The crowd murmured in genuine awe. They had never seen a dog move with such military precision. Brooks clipped the leash back onto Titan's collar. "Good boy," he said. He did not smile, but a quiet pride settled in his chest. They walked off the field toward the shaded resting area. Jealousy often masks itself as righteous indignation. When a person accustomed to unearned respect encounters genuine merit, their first instinct is rarely admiration. It is destruction. Evelyn watched the entire run from the VIP seating area. Her face grew tight. Her hands clenched around her crystal-studded leash. She saw the crowd clapping for the man in the faded jeans. She saw her dog's record erased in under a minute. She felt a burning, irrational anger. She could not accept defeat. She certainly could not accept defeat from someone she considered beneath her. She needed to reassert her dominance. She needed to prove that Brooks and his dog were dangerous animals that did not belong in her civilized world. Evelyn stood up sharply. She pulled Prince along. She bypassed the paved walkway and marched directly across the grass toward the resting area where Brooks sat. Brooks sat on a wooden bench under a large oak tree. Titan lay at his feet, drinking water from a collapsible canvas bowl. Brooks watched Evelyn approach from the corner of his eye. He recognized her aggressive posture. He tightened his grip on Titan's leash, bringing the dog slightly closer to his legs. Evelyn did not stop at a polite distance. She walked intentionally close. She invaded his space again, stepping so near that the hem of her white suit brushed against the wooden bench. She held a large, expensive leather handbag over her forearm. As she passed, she swung her arm out slightly. She dangled the heavy leather bag directly over Titan's head. Titan was a trained military working dog. His senses were highly tuned to detect anomalies. The sudden movement and the strong, unusual smell of the chemical leather treatment caught his attention. He did not growl. He did not bare his teeth. He simply lifted his head and sniffed the bottom of the handbag. His wet nose gently bumped against the expensive leather. It was a basic, investigative action. Evelyn saw her opportunity. She manufactured her crisis. She dropped the bag onto the grass. She took 2 dramatic steps backward and let out a piercing, hysterical scream. "Help!" she shrieked. Her voice echoed across the entire academy grounds. "He is attacking me. Get this beast away from me." The crowd froze. The clapping stopped immediately. Heads snapped toward the oak tree. Brooks stood up instantly. He pulled Titan behind him, placing his own body between the dog and the screaming woman. "He just sniffed your bag," Brooks said firmly. "He did not touch you. He tried to bite me." Evelyn screamed louder, clutching her wrist as if she had been injured. She pointed a trembling finger at Titan. "I told you. I told everyone this animal was a threat. He lunged at me. Look at him. He is out of control." Titan sat quietly behind Brooks. He looked confused by the loud noises, but he remained perfectly disciplined. He did not bark. People began to run over. Richard, the event director, sprinted across the grass. 2 security guards, heavily built men wearing tight black polo shirts, followed closely behind him. Attendees crowded around, their earlier admiration replaced instantly by fear and suspicion. They listened to the wealthy sponsor. They believed the frantic woman in the white suit. "I demand you call the police," Evelyn yelled at Richard as he arrived. Her face was flushed with fake terror. This man brought a vicious weapon to a family event. "That dog just tried to tear my arm off. He needs to be put down." Brooks looked at the growing crowd. He saw the shift in their eyes. The truth did not matter here. The performance did. Evelyn had created a lie loud enough to drown out the reality. She wanted to punish him for succeeding, and she was willing to destroy Titan to do it. The crowd formed a tight ring around the oak tree. Richard, the event director, stood frozen. 2 large security guards in black shirts shifted their weight from foot to foot. They looked at Evelyn, then at Brooks, then at the German shepherd sitting calmly on the grass. Nobody made a move to restrain the screaming woman. Evelyn realized her performance lacked an essential element. Her victim did not look dangerous. Titan sat completely still. His ears were up. He watched Evelyn with mild confusion. He did not growl. He did not bare his teeth. He completely failed to play the role of the vicious predator she needed him to be. The contrast between her hysterical screams and the dog's absolute discipline became obvious even to the frightened crowd. Evelyn felt her control slipping. She needed to force the dog to react. She needed proof that she was right. She tightened her grip on her training stick. It was a heavy fiberglass crop wrapped in leather and capped with a solid metal tip. She normally used it to guide Prince's gait during shows. Now she weaponized it. She stepped past Brooks. She moved with startling speed. She raised the heavy stick high above her head and brought it down with all her strength directly onto Titan's back. The metal tip struck the thick, jagged scar tissue on the dog's left flank. The sound cracked across the silent lawn like a gunshot. It was a heavy, sickening thud of metal hitting bone and muscle. Titan let out a sharp, breathless yelp. The impact drove his hind legs into the grass. His body flinched violently. Pain flared through his nervous system, triggering every survival instinct he possessed. For a fraction of a second, his lips curled back. His teeth showed. He was a combat veteran, subjected to an unprovoked attack. The instinct to bite, to defend, surged through him. "Hold," Brooks said. The word was low, sharp, and cut through the tension like a blade. Titan froze. His jaw snapped shut. His body trembled violently from the pain, but he did not move. He swallowed his natural instinct. He obeyed his handler. He stayed in his seated position, his amber eyes wide and locked onto Brooks. Evelyn stood over them, her chest heaving. She held the stick raised, ready to strike again. She waited for the retaliation that would justify her actions. It never came. Over 40 people witnessed the strike. The judges in their green blazers stood 10 yards away. The teenage volunteers held clipboards against their chests. The wealthy dog owners clutched their expensive leashes. Courage is rarely a permanent state of being. It is a brief choice made in a fraction of a second. When people witness a blatant act of cruelty, their first instinct is often to look for someone else to step forward. When no one does, silence becomes a collective agreement. A shared cowardice infects the group. Not a single person stepped forward. Richard stared intently at his walkie-talkie. The two security guards suddenly found the pattern of the grass fascinating. A woman wearing a sun hat covered her mouth with her hand and turned her body away. They all knew Evelyn was entirely in the wrong. They all saw her strike a passive animal, but they also knew the size of the checks she wrote to the academy. They chose their comfort over doing the right thing. Brooks did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the security guards. He did not even look at Evelyn. He dropped to his knees. He placed both hands gently on Titan's back. He ran his fingers over the thick scar tissue. He felt the muscle spasm under his touch. A dark red welt already began to form against the pale skin beneath the fur. Brooks checked the dog's spine. He checked the hip joint. He watched Titan's breathing. Brooks spent years in environments where violence was the only language spoken. His body knew how to fight. His hands knew how to dismantle a threat in seconds. The adrenaline flooded his system, demanding action. Every fiber of his being wanted to stand up and break the woman who hurt his partner. He pushed the anger down. He locked it away in a dark box in his mind. Reacting with violence would only prove Evelyn right. It would only give her the victory she desperately wanted. He had to be smarter than the enemy. "Easy, buddy," Brooks whispered. He stroked the side of Titan's face. "You did perfectly. I got you." Brooks stood up slowly. He turned to face Evelyn. He did not shout. He did not raise his fist. He simply looked at her. Brooks let the mask slip. For the first time since he arrived at the academy, he stopped playing the role of the quiet civilian. He looked at Evelyn with the cold, dead eyes of a Tier 1 operator who had neutralized threats in the worst corners of the world. It was a look devoid of fear, devoid of hesitation, and completely devoid of mercy. Evelyn felt the shift in the air. The temperature around them seemed to drop. The man standing in front of her suddenly felt incredibly large and incredibly dangerous. The righteous fury she felt a moment ago evaporated. Pure, primal fear took its place. She took an involuntary step backward. Her heel caught on the grass. She nearly lost her balance. She lowered the training stick slowly, her hand shaking. She realized she had crossed a line, and the man in front of her was fully capable of destroying her. But her pride refused to let her surrender in front of the crowd. She needed to control the narrative. "You see?" Evelyn yelled, though her voice wavered. She looked around at the silent crowd, desperately seeking validation. "He is dangerous. Both of them are. They do not belong here. I had to defend myself." Nobody agreed with her. Nobody nodded. But nobody contradicted her either. Their silence gave her exactly what she needed. It gave her permission to keep lying. Brooks kept his eyes locked on hers. "You hit my dog," he said. His voice was very quiet. It carried perfectly in the still air. "I defended myself." Evelyn lied again, gripping her expensive handbag. "You need to leave. Right now." Brooks did not argue. He knew a rigged game when he saw one. He reached down and picked up Titan's canvas water bowl. He collapsed it and shoved it into his back pocket. He grabbed the leather leash. He did not look at the event director. He did not look at the security guards. He had seen enough of the people here. He knew exactly what they were worth. "Heel," Brooks commanded. Titan stood up immediately, ignoring the pain radiating from his flank. He pressed himself against Brooks's leg. Together, they turned away from the screaming woman and the silent, cowardly crowd. They walked slowly toward the parking lot, maintaining perfect discipline in the face of absolute injustice. Brooks and Titan walked away from the oak tree. The heat of the afternoon sun pressed heavily against their backs. Brooks felt the sharp sting of injustice in his chest, but his military discipline held firm. He knew fighting in this environment served no tactical purpose. It would only make Titan a target for animal control. He needed to extract his partner from the hostile zone. Before they reached the paved edge of the parking lot, a loud voice called out behind them. "Wait right there. Stop." Brooks paused. He turned his body slowly, maintaining a protective stance in front of the German Shepherd. Richard jogged toward them, panting heavily. The event director carried his walkie-talkie like a plastic shield. Evelyn trailed a few paces behind him. The two large security guards flanked her. She had completely recovered her composure. The fake terror vanished from her face. A triumphant, vicious smirk replaced it. "You cannot just walk away," Richard said. He stopped a safe distance from Titan, his chest heaving. "I am leaving," Brooks stated flatly. "Not until we settle this," Richard insisted. He puffed out his chest, attempting to project a level of authority he clearly did not possess. "Mrs. Evelyn was attacked. Your animal posed a direct threat to the safety of our guests." "My animal sat perfectly still and took a hit from a metal rod," Brooks interrupted. His voice lacked any warmth or inflection. "You saw it happen. Everyone standing there saw it happen." Richard swallowed hard. His eyes darted nervously toward Evelyn, seeking her approval before speaking. "I saw a dangerous, unpredictable situation. I saw an aggressive dog threaten our primary sponsor. We have a strict zero-tolerance policy for that kind of behavior at this academy. Truth is often the first casualty when massive amounts of money enter the room. People will bend their own reality, twist their basic morals, and ignore the clear evidence of their own eyes to protect their financial security. Richard was not inherently a bad man. He was just a weak one. And weakness often causes far more damage than outright malice. Brooks looked directly at the balding director. "You are choosing to lie to protect a paycheck." "I am protecting the reputation of this facility," Richard snapped. His voice rose in a defensive pitch. You need to apologize to Mrs. Evelyn immediately. And you need to surrender your registration badge. Brooks did not react to the absurd demand. He looked past Richard and locked eyes with Evelyn. She stepped forward, her white suit completely unwrinkled, her posture radiating absolute arrogance. She felt totally invincible. "A simple apology will not suffice," Evelyn declared. She looked down her nose at the veteran. "I want it documented on the official record. This man and his mutt are permanently banned from the Coastal Elite Canine Academy. I will also contact the Regional Sporting Board. You will never set foot in a sanctioned agility trial in this state again." Brooks reached into the front pocket of his faded jeans. He pulled out the plastic registration badge. He held it out without a word. Richard stepped forward quickly and snatched the badge from his hand. "Consider your membership revoked. Your entry fee is completely forfeit." Brooks did not argue about the lost money. He did not care about the Regional Sporting Board or their sanctioned trials. He only cared about the trembling muscle under Titan's scarred coat. The dog needed a bag of ice and a quiet place to rest, not a screaming match in a hot parking lot. "Are you proud of this decision?" Brooks asked quietly, directing the question to Richard. Richard looked down at the pavement. He proved unable to meet the steady, piercing gaze of the Navy SEAL. "I am doing my job. Now get off the property before I have these guards physically remove you." Evelyn crossed her arms over her chest. "You do not belong here. You never did. People like you bring nothing but filth and violence into our refined spaces. Go back to whatever gutter you dragged that broken animal out of." The cruel words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. The security guards shifted uncomfortably on their feet, but they remained the silent enforcers of Evelyn's will. Several wealthy spectators had followed the group to the edge of the lawn. They watched the expulsion like a live television show. They whispered amongst themselves, safely aligning their opinions with the winning side. Brooks looked at the pristine green lawns, the white canvas tents, and the crowd of wealthy patrons. He saw a world completely disconnected from harsh reality. These people lived their entire lives inside a fragile bubble of purchased privilege. They had never faced a genuine, life-threatening crisis. They had never bled for a vital cause. They manufactured their own petty drama because their daily existence lacked any genuine struggle. "Come on, Titan," Brooks said softly. He turned his back on them. He refused to give Evelyn the satisfaction of an angry reaction. He walked toward his beat-up Ford truck with deliberate, measured steps. The absolute silence of his departure irritated Evelyn more than any shouted insult could. She desperately wanted him to beg. She wanted him to yell. She wanted him to validate her immense power by fighting fruitlessly against it. "Do not ever come back," Evelyn shouted at his retreating back. Brooks ignored the shrill command. He reached the truck and opened the passenger side door. He gently helped Titan up onto the fabric seat, moving his hands carefully to avoid the injured flank. He shut the door securely and walked around the front bumper to the driver's side. He climbed into the cab and gripped the steering wheel tightly. He watched Evelyn through the dusty windshield. She was already turning back toward the main agility field, surrounded by her eager sycophants. Richard walked closely beside her, nodding vigorously at every word she said. They looked exactly like medieval royalty returning to their court after banishing an unwanted peasant. Brooks turned the ignition key. The heavy diesel engine rumbled to life, shaking the frame of the old truck. He put the vehicle in gear and pulled out of the parking spot. He drove slowly down the long gravel driveway, leaving the manicured, artificial perfection of the elite academy behind him. He felt a bitter, metallic taste in his mouth. He had spent his entire adult life defending his country, protecting the very freedoms that allowed entitled people like Evelyn to live in unbothered, absolute luxury. And this was the thanks he received on his leave. A brutal strike to his loyal dog and a humiliating ban from a public sporting event. But as he drove toward the massive iron gates at the main entrance, he did not feel broken or defeated. He felt highly focused. He reached over the center console and rubbed the top of Titan's head. The large German shepherd leaned heavily into his calloused hand, trusting him completely. They had lost the battle at the academy, but the day was far from over. Fate possessed a peculiar way of balancing the scales of justice, and the universe was about to deliver a brutal, unforgettable lesson that Evelyn's vast fortune could never buy. Brooks guided his heavy truck down the winding gravel driveway. He rolled the windows down. The salty ocean air rushed into the cab, clearing out the lingering scent of expensive perfume and entitlement. Titan laid his large head on the center console, his breathing finally returning to a slow, steady rhythm. Brooks watched the pristine lawns of the academy fade in his rearview mirror. He felt a quiet relief. The toxic environment was behind them. He reached the main road and turned the steering wheel. He planned to head back to the naval base. He wanted a quiet, uneventful evening. Then the sound hit. It was not a sharp crack or a loud bang. It was a deep, guttural groan of tearing metal, followed instantly by a massive, earth-shaking crash. The noise vibrated through the asphalt and traveled up through the heavy tires of the Ford truck. Brooks hit the brakes instinctively. He looked in his side mirror. A thick plume of gray dust plumed into the clear blue sky directly over the academy grounds. Flocks of birds scattered in a frantic panic. Back at the agility field, the illusion of safety had shattered completely. The VIP seating area sat on a temporary raised platform constructed of heavy steel scaffolding and thick wooden planks. The structure held large catering tables, heavy industrial fans, and dozens of people. The construction crew had rushed the assembly that morning to please the wealthy sponsors. A critical load-bearing joint near the center gave way under the combined weight. The collapse happened in less than 3 seconds. The steel beams buckled. The wooden planks splintered violently. The heavy white canopy collapsed inward like a dying parachute. Panic is the ultimate equalizer. It strips away wealth, status, and polite manners in an absolute heartbeat, leaving only the primal, selfish instinct to survive. The wealthy spectators did not help each other. They screamed. They dropped their expensive leashes. They pushed past one another, trampling the very people they had been sipping champagne with moments before. Men in tailored suits shoved teenagers out of the way. Women abandoned their purebred dogs to flee the blinding cloud of dust. The manicured lawn transformed instantly into a chaotic stampede of terrified people. Evelyn had been standing near the edge of the platform when the floor gave out. The sudden drop threw her backward onto the grass. She hit the ground hard, scraping her arms and ruining her immaculate white suit. She gasped for air, temporarily stunned by the impact. She rolled over and pushed herself up to her knees. Dust coated her stiff blonde hair. Her ears rang from the deafening crash. She looked around frantically. She saw people running. She saw overturned chairs and shattered wine glasses. Then, a terrifying realization punched the air out of her lungs. "Leo!" Evelyn screamed. Leo was her 7-year-old son. He was a quiet boy, dressed neatly in a miniature blue blazer and khaki shorts. Evelyn had left him sitting near the center of the VIP platform with a tablet, ordering him to stay put while she dealt with Brooks. Evelyn scrambled forward on her hands and knees. She ignored the bleeding scrapes on her arms. She crawled toward the twisted pile of metal and broken wood. "Leo!" she shrieked again, her voice cracking with raw terror. A small, muffled cry answered her from deep within the wreckage. Evelyn threw herself at the debris. She grabbed a bent steel pipe and pulled with all her might. The pipe did not move a single inch. It was pinned under hundreds of pounds of structural framing. She dropped to her stomach and peered into a narrow, dark gap between 2 collapsed floorboards. She saw him. Leo lay trapped in a tiny pocket of space. A massive steel crossbeam rested just inches above his chest, held up precariously by a shattered wooden pillar. If that wooden pillar snapped, the steel beam would crush him instantly. Leo was crying silently, his face pale and covered in thick dirt. "Mommy," Leo whimpered. He could not move his legs. Evelyn screamed for help. She looked around, begging the fleeing crowd. "Help me. My son is trapped. Please." The same people who had eagerly agreed with her lies earlier now completely ignored her. They ran past her without a second glance. Richard, the event director, was already halfway across the parking lot, abandoning his post entirely. The security guards had vanished. Evelyn was completely alone with her trapped child. Sirens wailed in the distance. The response time was incredibly fast. 3 minutes later, a heavy red fire truck smashed through the academy's closed front gates. It tore across the pristine lawn, leaving deep, muddy ruts in the grass. The truck slammed to a halt near the wreckage. Captain Miller leaped out of the cab. He was a broad-shouldered man wearing heavy yellow turnout gear and a scarred helmet. He shouted orders to his crew. 4 firefighters grabbed pry bars, hydraulic spreaders, and wooden stabilization chocks. They rushed toward the collapsed platform. Evelyn grabbed the captain's heavy jacket. "My son, he is under there, right there." She pointed frantically at the narrow gap. Captain Miller dropped to the ground. He shined a heavy tactical flashlight into the opening. He saw the terrified boy. He also saw the shattered wooden pillar taking the full weight of the steel beam. The captain's face grew incredibly grim. He stood up and held up a fist. "Stop!" he shouted to his crew. "Hold your positions! Do not touch the structure!" The firefighters froze immediately. "What are you doing?" Evelyn screamed, grabbing his arm again. "Get him out!" "Ma'am, you need to step back," Captain Miller said. His voice was calm but urgent. "The structure is entirely compromised. That primary beam is sitting on a cracked support. The gap is less than 2 feet wide. My men cannot fit in there with their heavy gear. If we try to cut the steel or use the hydraulic spreaders, the vibration will cause the wooden support to fail. It will collapse completely." Evelyn stared at him, her mind unable to process the terrible words. "You have to do something. Use your machines. Lift it." "We cannot bring a crane across this soft dirt fast enough," the captain explained, his eyes scanning the wreckage for any other safe entry point. "And lifting the top pieces might shift the weight directly onto the boy. We need someone small enough to crawl in there and attach a drag harness to him so we can pull him out horizontally. But the path is lined with sharp metal and jagged wood. An adult simply cannot make that squeeze without bringing the roof down." Evelyn fell to her knees in the dirt. The money, the status, the power she wielded a few moments ago meant absolutely nothing now. She was utterly helpless. She watched the wooden support splinter a fraction of an inch more. A fine layer of dust drifted down onto her crying son. She began to sob loudly, pressing her face into her dirty hands. She realized her boy was going to die, and all the wealth in the world could not stop it. A heavy diesel engine roared over the sound of the idling fire truck. The beat-up Ford truck barreled across the lawn, ignoring the paved paths. It stopped abruptly, right next to the fire engine. The driver's side door flew open. Brooks stepped out. He had heard the crash. He had seen the dust. His military instinct to run toward the disaster had overridden his desire to go home. Titan jumped out right behind him, his amber eyes locked onto the chaotic scene, ready for orders. The heavy doors of the Ford truck slammed shut. Brooks stood on the torn grass, assessing the disaster zone. His eyes moved rapidly over the collapsed platform. He did not look at the screaming people or the overturned tables. He looked at the angles of the twisted steel. He looked at the stress points. He read the wreckage exactly like he read a compromised building in a combat zone. Titan sat by his side. The dog felt the tension in the air. The chaotic noise of the fleeing crowd faded into the background. Titan locked his focus entirely on Brooks. Brooks walked briskly toward the red fire engine. He bypassed the frantic spectators and approached Captain Miller. The large firefighter stood helplessly near the edge of the collapse, holding his heavy flashlight. "You cannot go in there," Captain Miller shouted, holding up a thick, gloved hand. Brooks did not stop until he reached the edge of the debris field. "I am not going in. My dog is." Captain Miller shook his head. "Absolutely not. That primary beam is sitting on a fractured wooden pillar. Any sudden movement or added weight will bring the entire roof down. We need specialized shoring equipment." "You do not have time for shoring equipment," Brooks said flatly. He pointed to the wooden pillar. "That support is bowing. The wood fibers are snapping right now. It will fail in less than 2 minutes. The boy will die before your equipment arrives." Captain Miller looked at the pillar, then looked at the heavy German shepherd standing quietly next to Brooks. "Your dog is too big. The gap is less than 2 feet wide, and it is lined with jagged steel. He is a certified military extraction specialist," Brooks replied. His voice held absolute certainty. "He knows how to low crawl under razor wire. He knows how to drag weight, and he takes commands instantly. He is the only chance that kid has." Evelyn knelt in the dirt just a few feet away. She heard every word. She looked up at Brooks. Her face was smeared with dust and tears. Her expensive white suit was ruined. She looked at Titan, the dog she had struck with a metal rod less than an hour ago. She opened her mouth to speak, to beg, but no words came out. The sheer weight of her guilt choked her. Captain Miller made a split-second decision. He stepped back. "Do it! But if that beam shifts, I am pulling you both back." Brooks dropped to his knees in the dirt. He looked Titan directly in the eyes. He ran a hand quickly over the dog's left flank. The red welt from the strike was swollen and hot to the touch. Titan winced slightly, but he did not pull away. People often mistake blind obedience for loyalty. They think a dog follows orders because it fears punishment or desires a treat. But true loyalty in the face of mortal danger is born from mutual sacrifice, a deep bond forged in shared hardship that no amount of money can ever purchase. Titan trusted Brooks completely, and Brooks trusted Titan with a human life. "Listen to me," Brooks said quietly. "Target inside, crawl low, bring him out." He pointed toward the dark, narrow gap. Titan dropped his belly entirely to the grass. He began to leopard crawl forward. He moved with slow, deliberate precision. He did not rush. He pressed his body flat against the dirt, sliding under a sharp piece of torn aluminum siding. The gap grew tighter. The wooden pillar groaned loudly above them. A shower of splinters and fine dust rained down on Titan's back. "Hold!" Brooks commanded softly. Titan froze instantly. He did not move a single muscle. The heavy steel beam shifted a fraction of an inch, settling lower. The structure stabilized temporarily. "Move," Brooks said. Titan crept further into the dark pocket. He reached the trapped boy. Leo lay curled on his side, crying softly. He was terrified of the dark and the heavy metal pressing down around him. He saw the large dog approaching and squeezed his eyes shut. Titan did not bark. He gently nudged Leo's shoulder with his wet nose. The soft contact broke the boy's panic. Leo opened his eyes. Brooks watched from the outside. He could barely see Titan's hind legs in the shadows. He needed Titan to secure a grip. "Take!" Brooks called out. Titan opened his powerful jaws. He carefully gripped the thick fabric of Leo's blue blazer near the collar. He secured a massive mouthful of cloth without letting his teeth touch the boy's skin. He locked his jaw tight. "Back!" Brooks commanded. He blew a short, sharp whistle. Titan began to pull. He pushed his paws into the loose dirt and dragged the heavy child backward. The added friction strained Titan's muscles. His injured flank scraped against a low-hanging piece of twisted steel. The sharp edge dug directly into the swollen welt. Titan let out a low whimper of pain, but he did not open his jaw. He did not let go of the boy. He pulled harder. "Slow," Brooks said. He kept his voice completely steady, projecting calm control into the chaotic space. The wooden pillar let out a loud, terrifying crack. The wood splintered violently down the center. The steel beam dropped another 2 inches. It pinned the back of Titan's neck against the dirt. Evelyn screamed. Captain Miller lunged forward, but Brooks held out his arm, blocking the firefighter. "Do not touch the structure," Brooks warned. He looked into the gap. "Dig, Titan. Pull." Titan flattened himself even further. He used sheer brute strength to drag himself and the boy through the narrowing hole. He fought against the weight of the steel, scraping his back. He pulled Leo inch by agonizing inch. Finally, Leo's feet cleared the most dangerous section. Brooks reached into the opening. He grabbed the boy by the ankles and pulled him the rest of the way out onto the open grass. Titan scrambled backward out of the hole immediately after him. The moment Titan cleared the debris, the fractured wooden pillar finally gave way. The massive steel beam crashed down into the dirt with a deafening roar. It crushed the exact spot where Leo had been trapped seconds before. A massive cloud of thick dust billowed outward, covering everyone. Captain Miller grabbed Leo and carried him rapidly away from the settling wreckage. 2 paramedics rushed over, carrying an oxygen tank and a trauma bag. They laid the boy carefully on the grass and began a rapid assessment. Evelyn scrambled across the ground. She threw herself over her son, weeping uncontrollably. She kissed his dirty face over and over again. "You are safe," she sobbed. "You are safe." Leo coughed weakly, but he was breathing fine. He looked past his mother, searching the faces around him. He pointed a small, shaking finger. "The doggy helped me." Evelyn turned around. She looked through the clearing dust. Brooks knelt in the dirt, wiping the thick layer of debris from Titan's face. The German shepherd panted heavily. Blood trickled down his back, where the sharp steel had cut deeply into the fresh welt. Brooks took off his gray t-shirt and pressed it firmly against the dog's wound to stop the bleeding. The crowd of wealthy spectators had slowly crept back toward the edge of the disaster zone. They watched the scene unfold in absolute silence. The people who had cheered for Evelyn's cruelty now stared in deep shame. They witnessed a broken, scarred rescue dog do what none of them had the courage to attempt. Evelyn stood up slowly. Her hands shook violently. She walked away from the paramedics and approached Brooks. She stopped 3 feet away. She looked at the bloody shirt in Brooks's hands. She looked at the deep scar on Titan's snout. She realized exactly what she had done. She realized exactly who she had attacked. The arrogance that defined her entire life vanished completely, leaving only a hollow, devastating reality. Brooks did not look up at her. He kept his focus on his partner, applying steady pressure to the wound. He had completed his mission. He had nothing left to say to these people. The dust settled over the ruined VIP platform. Sirens wailed as more emergency vehicles breached the academy gates. Evelyn remained on her knees in the dirt. She clutched Leo tightly against her chest. The boy clung to her, crying softly into her ruined shoulder. She looked up from her son's face and stared at the man she had insulted. She stared at the dog she had struck. Brooks did not pay attention to her. He focused entirely on Titan. He pressed his gray shirt against the bleeding cut on the dog's back. Titan panted, his amber eyes calm despite the pain. He leaned into Brooks's hand. 2 police cruisers parked violently near the fire truck. Doors flew open. 4 officers stepped out to secure the perimeter. One of them, a tall man in his late 40s with graying temples and a sharp, disciplined posture, walked toward the center of the chaos. His name tag read, Ramirez. He scanned the crowd, assessing threats and victims. His eyes swept past the weeping woman and the wealthy spectators. Then, his gaze landed on the man kneeling in the dirt. Ramirez stopped walking. He narrowed his eyes, studying the broad shoulders and the short military haircut. He looked at the massive German shepherd sitting beside the man. Recognition hit him instantly. Ramirez bypassed the paramedics. He walked directly toward Brooks. He stopped 2 feet away, snapped his heels together, and raised his right hand in a crisp, perfect salute. "Chief Petty Officer Brooks," Officer Ramirez said. His voice carried loudly over the noise of the idling engines. "It is an honor to see you again, sir." The surrounding crowd heard the title. The murmurs died down. People turned their heads. Evelyn looked up, her tear-streaked face freezing in shock. Brooks looked up. He recognized the officer from a joint training operation years ago. He returned the salute with a brief nod. "Officer Ramirez, Good to see you, though the circumstances could be better. Ramirez lowered his hand. He looked down at Titan. He saw the fresh blood soaking into Brooks's shirt. He saw the thick, jagged scar tissue underneath. The officer's face tightened with sudden anger. "Who hit the dog?" Ramirez demanded. He did not ask what happened. He recognized a fresh strike mark. No one spoke. The wealthy spectators stared at the ground. Ramirez turned to face the crowd. True authority does not require a raised voice. It only requires absolute conviction. "This animal is not a pet," Ramirez stated clearly. "This is a decorated military working dog. 3 years ago, this dog took a piece of shrapnel from an explosive device to shield a squad of Marines. He saved 6 lives that day. He earned a medal for valor. I want to know who put a fresh wound on him." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. The people who had watched Evelyn strike the dog felt the crushing weight of their own cowardice. They had allowed a wealthy woman to assault a war hero because they feared losing their social standing. The realization burned them. Evelyn opened her mouth. Her voice trembled. "I did not know." Ramirez looked down at her. "Ignorance is not an excuse for cruelty, ma'am." Evelyn scrambled to her feet. She looked at Brooks. She looked at the bloody shirt. She reached for her expensive handbag, a pathetic reflex born from a lifetime of buying her way out of consequences. "I can pay for his medical bills," she stammered. "I can write a check right now." "Name your price, please." Brooks finished tying a makeshift bandage around Titan's torso. He stood up slowly. He looked at Evelyn. He did not look angry. He looked completely indifferent. "Keep your money," Brooks said. "You cannot buy honor, and you cannot buy a clear conscience. You hit a dog because you felt small. You needed to prove you held power. Now you know exactly what your power is worth." He pointed to the collapsed steel structure. "When the floor fell out from under you, your money did not lift that beam. Your status did not save your son. The only thing that mattered was the courage of the animal you tried to destroy." Evelyn crumpled inward. She covered her face with her hands. She had no defense. She had no retorts. The reality of her actions stripped her completely bare. A black sedan pulled up behind the police cruisers. A man stepped out. He was in his 60s, wearing a sharp charcoal suit. He carried a demeanor of absolute authority. He was Marcus Vance, the chief executive officer of the entire Coastal Elite Canine franchise. He had received a frantic call about the collapse and drove straight from his office. Vance marched toward the group. He bypassed Richard, the cowardly event director who was currently trying to hide behind a fire truck. Vance approached Officer Ramirez and Brooks. He took in the scene rapidly. He saw the injured dog, the trapped boy, and the weeping woman. Ramirez gave Vance a quick, concise briefing. He explained the collapse. He explained the rescue. He also explained the unprovoked assault on the military dog prior to the disaster. Vance turned his attention to Evelyn. He had tolerated her arrogance for years because her checks cleared, but he understood public relations, and he understood basic decency. "Mrs. Evelyn," Vance said sharply. Evelyn lowered her hands. She looked at him with desperate eyes. "Marcus, please. It was a misunderstanding." "It was an assault," Vance corrected him coldly. "I am revoking your membership to this academy and every other facility we own. Your donations are no longer accepted. You are permanently banned from these grounds. If you ever return, Officer Ramirez will arrest you for trespassing." Evelyn opened her mouth to argue, to threaten his funding, but she stopped. She looked at the faces of the crowd. They were not looking at her with admiration anymore. They looked at her with disgust. She had lost her empire in a single afternoon. She turned away, gathered her son, and walked toward the exit in absolute disgrace. Vance turned to Brooks. "Sir, I do not have the words to apologize for what happened here today. We will cover any veterinary care Titan needs. We will also deal with our staff who failed to protect him." Brooks adjusted the collar around Titan's neck. "Just fix your building. Make sure it does not happen again." Society often operates on a flawed metric, measuring human value by the size of a bank account or the pedigree of a name. But when disaster strikes, those superficial layers burn away instantly, leaving only the undeniable truth of a person's character. True heroes do not demand attention. They simply step forward when everyone else steps back. Brooks did not wait for a response. He looked at Ramirez and gave a final nod. He picked up the leather leash. "Heel," Brooks commanded softly. Titan stood up. He ignored the pain in his back. He pressed his shoulder against Brooks's leg. They walked away from the wreckage, away from the flashing lights, and away from the silent, staring crowd. They moved with the quiet dignity of warriors who knew their true worth. They climbed into the old Ford truck and drove away, leaving behind a ruined academy, a broken woman, and a profound lesson about the true cost of arrogance. The story of Brooks and Titan is not just about a soldier and his rescue dog. It is a profound reminder that true worth is never measured by wealth, designer clothes, or social status. It is measured by courage, loyalty, and the willingness to step forward when everyone else steps back. In a world that often values appearance over substance, we must remember to honor the quiet heroes walking among us. They do not seek applause or validation. They simply do what is right, even when it is hard, and even when they are treated unfairly. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder of what true heroism looks like. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. May God bless you and your family with strength, compassion, and the courage to always stand up for what is right. If you believe in the power of true loyalty and divine grace, please type Amen in the comments below.